So you're thinking of painting a room and you got your paint and your brush ready to go. Well, there's a couple things that you'll probably need on top of that in order to get the job done. Here are 13 things you need to paint a room. If you're a seasoned professional contractor, more than likely you'll already know what you need on any given project. But I find it's always handy to hear about other people's process when doing things, because I'm a firm believer that you can learn from literally anyone. For those of you who have some spare time on your hands and you're thinking of freshening up that one guest room in your home that still has the same paint from 15 years ago, I wanted to provide you with a checklist of materials you need to set yourself up for success. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is James from thepaintpeople.com, and we specialize in providing painting and decorating content for all you do-it-yourselfers and anyone else looking for some paint and color help. Honestly, whether you're a pro or an average Joe, we've got you covered. The painting process is a pretty involved one, and there's a lot of things that you need in order to start painting a room. Because we're the paint people, let's start with the paint itself. If you're painting a surface that requires priming, which is normally going to be unpainted surfaces or darker bright colors that you want to cover up, then get a primer to give you a clean slate to work off of. In a lot of cases, you could instead opt for a self-priming paint for those less severe cases of a previously painted room that is just getting a slight change of color. Speaking of color, you need to pick one. But in addition to that, you also have to figure out the product as well. Figure out which room you're painting. Is it high traffic or low traffic? Is there going to be a lot of moisture in the room, like a bathroom or maybe a kitchen? Do you need extra washability in the form of a higher end product, or perhaps a higher sheen level like eggshell or pearl? Wherever you buy your paint, the paint professionals at the store can assist you with product selection. Just be clear on where you're using this paint. Now the color. Well, that's a different story altogether. We've put out a ton of videos all about color, which you can check out for some extra advice, but at the end of the day, it's going to have to come down to your personal preference. Even if you end up hiring a color consultant, they'll normally ask questions about your tastes and incorporate it into their design. Once you've gotten all that out of the way, now we can get into the materials required to get this paint on the walls. When all the furniture is moved off of the walls, it's always a good idea to cover the floors. Floor covering is something you want to do as early as possible in the process. I like to use a combination of those canvas drop sheets and rollable cardboard, which I'll tape to the floor directly, especially over smoother surfaces. And with that tape that I'm using, a lot of people will also use it on the baseboards or along the ceilings to ensure clean edges when painting. If you plan on painting on a semi-regular basis, however, I would encourage you to practice painting without tape. It may be intimidating at first, but with enough practice, you'll be able to speed up your entire process and avoid the potential for any paint bleeding that can sometimes happen with even the best painter's tape on the market. That being said, having painter's tape around is always extremely handy. If there is furniture that was moved off of the walls, it's usually a good idea to keep it all centrally located in the room, and then have the entire thing covered in a layer of thin plastic. This is especially important when you're painting ceilings, because there's a very high chance the spray from your roller will travel far enough to make contact, and we don't want that, unless you're a fan of Jackson Pollock. Once the floor around the perimeter of your room is clear, you then want to clear the walls themselves by removing wall fixtures and picture frames. One of the first tools I use isn't even paint related. It's actually just a drill or a simple screwdriver, usually a flathead. If I wanted a clean slate in that room, I will remove all of the nails and screws in the wall, and I'll also remove all the plate covers surrounding the switches and outlets. Some painters will leave them on and brush around them, others might just tape over them entirely, but based on my experience, I found it to be most efficient to simply remove them and put them back on afterwards. It just saves time having to cut around them, and it eliminates any possibility of getting paint on those plates. Trust me, you'll thank me after. You can put the plates in a Ziploc bag along with the screws, or you can use a cardboard box that your paint might have come in as well. Just try and keep them safe one way or another. If they're a bit dirty, this might be the perfect opportunity to either clean them and just soak them overnight in soap and water, or just replace them with brand new ones, because it'll really complete the look if they're all nice and shiny. We can now turn our attention to the walls themselves. you're definitely going to need to plaster those nail and screw holes and any other superficial wall damage that might be there. And you do that with spackle and a pair of spatulas. Yes, I said 2. I find it super handy to have 2 spatulas because it'll allow you to hold the spackle in one and apply and smooth it out with the other. It just makes the process so much easier. Once that plaster is dry, you're going to need to smooth it out with some fine grit sandpaper. You can also use that same sandpaper to even out any rough texture in other areas of the wall, which will give the end look a really nice finish. I always have sandpaper on me whenever I'm painting because you never know when you might come across a little bit of plaster that might have been missed, or a little rough patch that could use a bit more sanding. You might also come across some peeling paint that is just a bit too aggressive for sandpaper alone, and that's when a metal paint scraper can be very useful. This tool is especially important in those older homes with layers upon layers upon layers of old paint, or on exterior projects. But to be honest, in a pinch, you can sometimes use your spatula instead of a designated scraper, as long as it's nothing serious. Like a good metal spatula could do the trick too. If you noticed any severe dirt and grime, it might be handy to clean those walls a bit with some soap and water, or TSP for the more deep cleans. TSP usually comes in a powder and you dilute it, and it just does a great job on the heavy duty grease that some walls can have. So all of that, and we haven't even started painting yet. Well, now let's talk about the painting related tools. You obviously have your brush, and this one is largely going to be personal preference. The smaller brushes are easier to use over long periods of time, but the larger brushes will hold more paint and be a little more efficient overall. Some people will have different brushes for different projects, but I've always been a fan of a 2.5 angled paintbrush. For me, it's the perfect balance of comfort and paint distribution. But if you've painted before, you need a little bit more than a brush to paint an entire room. You also need a good roller. Your roller will cover about 90% of the wall surface area, and it's made up of a roller frame or cage and a sleeve or roller cover. Generally, the thinner roller sleeves are more suited for super smooth surfaces, and the thicker ones are going to be better for rougher surfaces. It's always important to invest in a good quality roller cover that is lint-free, because the last thing you want to have to do is pick out little bits of your roller after you've used it. Then of course, you need your paint tray, which not only holds paint for your roller, but you can easily use it as an alternative place to also dip your paintbrush in from time to time. The last thing I'd recommend is a pole, which will really save your back when you're rolling all day. You can get some with variable adjustable lengths, so you can set it where it feels comfortable for you. Or if there's an area that's just out of reach, just extend it. The screw end of that pole is also pretty universal and can hold accessories like brush holders for those higher, hard to reach areas where you gotta cut a hallway, for example, or you can even put a broom head on it to clean up at the end of the day. So these are some of the core pieces of equipment and tools you need to paint a room. There's a handful of other items that you could use, like caulking, tray liners, cutting cans, but if you just go ahead with these 13, you should have some confidence in knowing that you're prepared. Or you could just hire a professional and they can bring all their own stuff. If you're still having trouble picking the right paint, we have some paint videos right over here talking about different finishes and different product grades so you can be well informed in the all-important paint selection process. There's a whole lot more than just picking a color, so I hope these videos help you. See you on the next one.